Okay. Mai ke awalau o pu'uloa ai ka pili o kahe velina mai ke aloha o hono uli uli. Welcome to Mo'o ʻŌlelo. My name is Kavena, and I'm the Hawaii Pacific Resources Librarian here at the University of Hawaii West Oahu. Mo'o ʻŌlelo is part of the Big Read Hawaii, which seeks to broaden our understanding of the world and its people through reading, conversations, art, and connections. We'll be sharing the link to the full schedule of events in the chat. So, Nanai Ke Kumu, Volume 3, was selected as a companionship book to the Big Read Hawaii. So, who better to talk about Ho'oponopono than Aunty Lynette and Kaʻaiʻai Paglinawan, who will be sharing their ike and experience as two generations of Native Hawaiian social workers and Ho'oponopono practitioners. If you have a question for Aunty or Kaʻaiʻai, you can ask them in the chat or use our question slide. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Anake and Kaʻaiʻai to introduce themselves and tell us their mo'olelo.
Aloha, and thank you, Kavena. Aloha, everyone. How are you folks doing on this beautiful day, Thursday in Hawaii, or wherever you're zooming from? Well, I'm in Ko'olaupoko, mai kare ohe mai. I am Kaʻaiʻai Paglinawan. I am the third daughter of Lynette K. Paglinawan, co-author of Nana Ike Kumu 3, as well as Richard Ke Kumu Ikawai o Keola Paglinawan, co-author as well of Nana Ike Kumu 3. Aloha. I am so pleased to be here, and I'd like to offer this time to my mama to introduce herself. Aloha, mai.
I'm known as Aunty Lynette. I began my journey in this area formally after I got my MSW from UH Manoa and began my work at the Lili'uokalani Children's Center as a field child and family worker. With the opportunity at that agency that service Hawaiian children and families, we were so fortunate that Tutumeri Kavena Pukui was asked to be a culture consultant to the social workers because our professional training did not really prepare us to work with Hawaiian families from a Hawaiian perspective. It was all Western. So when one of the families of a worker began talking about Hawaiian courses, he said, I never learned how to work with courses. And so the administration gave serious thought and allowed him to make contact. Because he said, if I could do whatever I needed, I could talk to my tutu. That was Tutu Mary Kavena Pukui. She became the culture consultant to the agency back in the 60s. And it began a journey that exploded for me and opened the doors to be able to learn about ways to help Hawaiians, clients who had Hawaiian problems. It opened a door for me in a situation where the person talked about a Hawaiian dream of her grandmother appearing in the dream wearing a black mu'u, holding a Bible, but shaking her fingers at her. She became frightened because black meant death to her. And when I heard that she was frightened, it occurred to me, should I offer to take her dream to Tutu, who can give us a Hawaiian version of what her dream meant? With her approval, I went to see Tutu Pukui, and Tutu's interpretation was not one of doom. In fact, it was a handle to offer to her that when her tutu was wearing the black mu'u, Tutu was actually doing Ho'oponopono. And the shaking of her fingers to the woman was scolding her and saying, how come you not doing Ho'oponopono? You used to go with me when you were a child. You saw me doing Ho'oponopono. How come you not doing it? Wow. The woman said, but I no remember. So, cunning me, I said, would you like to learn? As soon as she said yes, I said, would it be okay if you and I learn together from Tutu Pukui so we can use it in our sessions? And she said, I would love that. That began my journey in Ho'oponopono. And I mentored under Tutu for the next 3 years. And whenever I had a situation that I sensed was a Hawaiian issue, I'd go for culture consultation. Every Thursday, she was available. And I want to stress that because as a person at that time learning about Ho'oponopono, and as I was using it in casework, in work with the families, I knew I had a mentor I could turn to for guidance. So those who want to learn, check with the person if they will continue to be available to answer your questions, to help make corrections, to give you new ideas for entering a particular subject area. Tutu Pukui was my mentor. And after I left, I was called back again because I was on leave. I was called back and offered to do the research practitioner project for the agency to determine if using Ho'oponopono was viable with the families of that time. And the result for me was, oh, yes, it is. And you will get dramatic, positive changes that opened the way for the agency to get involved with Hawaiian type appropriate connections for intervention with their children and families. And I understand that they used it not only with the children and families, but they extended it to community engagement and into some regulations as well. Since that time, I was invited to join faculty at UH Manoa and then later at UH West Oahu, where I am currently employed. Tutu Pukui was so happy to talk about Ho'oponopono because she made the offer first to the Department of Health, who said to her, it was all superstition. And she was so happy when Liliuokalani Trust invited her to share her knowledge to social workers, where families who didn't have it could turn to the professional outside. And she empowered so many of the staff to do things in a more Hawaiian way. She actually wanted Ho'oponopono to be taught to families so they can begin to do it for themselves. She wanted this process armed with families so that there's a healer in every home. It's taken us a long time to get to that point. But Liliuokalani Trust is embarked on that pathway through Ho'opono. At West Oahu, I have an Indigenous Native Hawaiian health and healing career pathway to entice beginning students at West Oahu with an interest in the health field. But I'm partial to the field of social work. And these classes are at the entry level to prepare individuals to be pono. You have to be pono with yourself first before you can help others. And some of the classes deal with that. And then the other part is Aya ilo kune iko hino. Know that you have all that you need inside of you. If you prepare yourself, you have to deal with your issues. And you can. Because it's there inside of you. So at the bachelor level, this is what those courses are directed to. And I'm helping out on preparing towards that effort for a career. So I turned it to Kaʻaiʻai, and later on she'll ask me questions.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. I just so happened to work at Little Kalani Trust that she was just speaking about. I am involved in an effort that actually was currently going on at the same time while Nana Ikikumu 3 was being written. My journey is a little different than hers because both of my parents learned it from Tutu. So they chose to use it as our family's way of getting back into balance, into lokahi as individuals of a family. So we had to practice. We didn't know. We knew what the word was, Ho'oponopono, and you just got to do Ho'oponopono. That's how we did it in the family. And as a child, I didn't realize people did not know this process, and they didn't necessarily use this process. Their kupuna might have, but not them. And when I went through my crazy life, did my wonderful things, and then realized, I gotta be an adult eventually. I had to adult that, I gotta go to college. I'm now 26, 27 years old. What am I gonna do? I don't wanna be like my parents. They dedicated their life to helping the world. They dedicated their life to helping our lahui. And I didn't want to do that. I said, no, I was very selfish. I wanted my life to be in a different path. Then I actually went to school and realized, oh my goodness, I'm exactly like them. What a self-actualization was that. Oh my goodness. And when I had to apply for the Bachelor's of Social Work, they said, what do you want to do? I said, go work at Kuleana Children's Center, which it was called at that time. And they said, why? I said, because my whole family worked there. My mother used to work there. My father used to work there. My aunties, my uncles. They even part of the secretary pool. And I know everybody there. I was raised at the Honolulu or Moʻolelo unit. I was also privileged to meet and participate with stuff with mom at the Waiana unit when she worked there for several years. And then lastly at our Haleʻaha unit, which is out in Punaluu, where she was unit manager. So I grew up at various locations of Kuleana Children's Center. So that's where I'm going. And eventually I said, yes, I'm gonna go there. So I made a conscious effort to reach out. Did my practicum there, but because I was very po'opakiki, I refused to let my parents help me with my schooling, and even though they offered, and I just became a guardian of my 7-year-old nephew. So I now had a child. I worked 2 jobs. And they watched how I struggled. So I applied for this scholarship out of nowhere because I saw this wonderful individual, Palamali, giving a lecture about the Native Hawaiian scholarship program. And I said, oh, I'm going to chance him. And then I go for the interview, and what does he have sitting on his desk is Nana Ike Kumu 1 and 2. And he asked me this really telling question is, what is Kuleana to you? Oh my goodness. I cry, and you don't know why I cried, and I'm looking at the books, Nana Ike Kumu 1 and 2, and I gotta compose myself. I'm supposed to be professional. I'm supposed to be, right? You're going for this interview. Why should they pick you out of hundreds of other Hawaiians out there for this scholarship? Why should they pick you? So what mom talks about being pono, I really spoke from my na'au, because it's really, I wanted my path not to follow my parents. That was my realization. And I realized what I learned from my Tita Lahela is, koho ia, ano mo choice. My path was kind of laid out for me. I just had to pick up the broom and sweep away all the stuff that was the nahelehele that was in my way, and find the true path of where I was going. And part of that path was social work and service. Service to myself, service to my family, and service to my community and other Native Hawaiians. So I was so lucky I was chosen. I moved away to Kauai for almost 3 years, and I served an underserved Native Hawaiian population on Kauai with our Native Hawaiian health at Ho'olahui, Hawaii, our health center. And it was a wonderful experience. First experience, gang, moving away from my parents. Yeah, I moved to town, but I still on the island. I still can drive home. So it didn't count. I was across the ocean. I'm not gonna just drive 20 minutes and come back home. So very different experience for me. And it was really eye-opening, because I now realized those lessons that they have been teaching us as children, as their own children, that they learned from Nana Ike Kumu 1 and 2, and how we use it in our own family, and how professionally I might be able to use it in my professional life as a social worker. So came back to Oahu, Because unit manager at Haleʻaha asked, "Are you ready to come back home yet? I still have your job waiting." I said, "Oh, I still get opportunity." She said, "Babe, I've been holding your job for 3 years. Are you gonna come back?" And I said, "Oh yeah, okay, I'll come back." So went back, and it's been a wonderful journey, because I was also blessed to work at the Children's Center, which allowed me flexibility. Who can say that they can bring their mom and their dad to work with clients where confidentiality is strictly upheld, and they get to work alongside of me and I get to work alongside of them? Me, I was that lucky gal. I would bring my parents to work, and I told them, I want to be a Hawaiian social worker. I don't want to just be a social worker that knows the Western theories, knows the Western therapies that I went to school for to learn about. I want to be a Hawaiian social worker. Will you come and watch what I do, listen to what I say, and see how I'm doing things? And am I doing it in a Hawaiian way, from our Hawaiian worldview? They came to me, with me, to work for about 8 years and watched me and coached, not just me, but the whole staff at our Haleʻaha unit, in our groups and stuff, because they also saw the validity of what we're trying to do. And it wasn't just doing Hawaiian tasks. It was literally incorporating what I knew of and my understanding of what was contained in Nana Ike Kumu 1 and 2 from my parents' teachings. Then I tried this big, bold move. I said, I'm going to teach my grief group, because at ʻŌlelo Kuleana Trust, we service Native Hawaiian children of full or part Aboriginal blood who are part or full orphan and destitute. So I was doing grief group, and I said, I'm going to teach my families how to do Ho'oponopono, because what I saw in our grief discussions was a lot of the children felt like they still had stuff to say to mom or dad who died. Was I a bad kid? Did I do something wrong? How do I say sorry? So me not knowing any better, oh, okay, we go to the graveyard. Come, I will take you, and we go talk. We go talk to mama, we go talk to dad. We can say we're sorry and all of that. Then I said, you know what? We also got to forgive ourselves too. So we go use the process. Oh my goodness, talk about butterflies when your parents are the ones who are featured in the books. And they're the ones reading your teachings of Ho'oponopono to others. You talk about the sweaty palms and the cotton t-shirt, all of a sudden I get the wet spots on the back and the underarms. That was me. I chanced it and I did it. And they gave me their critiques. And then on one session, my family came and they were arguing. And I literally sat down and I played haku. I played the role of the haku. And when I say play, I don't mean like an actor. I was the one who helped to facilitate Ho'oponopono on behalf of this family. But I didn't tell them we were doing Ho'oponopono, because every time I tell them that word, everybody goes, oh no, that's an ancient practice. I don't want to screw it up. I don't want to. They have so much reverence and a little bit of fright to not do harm to our practices or not do it right. So, okay, I did it right in front of them, led them to pule mahiki, we get into the mihikala and oki, and all of a sudden at the end when they're crying on each other and they hugging each other and they say, I forgive you, I forgive you. And then they turn to me and they hug me, they kiss me, they say, thank you, Auntie. I said, do you know what we just did? And they both said no. And I asked all the other families who are watching this in our grief group happen in action. And everybody said, no. And I said, what you just saw was Ho'oponopono. This is what I was trying to tell you, all of you. And they all said, oh, we like try now. All of a sudden, we like try. At the same time, even though I worked at the agency, I wasn't aware of the machine already started rolling for the creation of Nana Ike Kumu 3 with my father, Uncle Dennis, and Aunty Malia Craver. My children call her Tutu, so if I skip between Auntie and Tutu, please excuse me, and it's because of who my audience is and I'm talking about her. So they had previous talks and they said, yes, we're gonna do it. Yes, we're gonna do it. And Tutu Malia passed away before the actual work started. But she had gotten the ball rolling. So it was Uncle Dennis, Kawahi, my father, and Valley Kanuha, who was going to be the ghostwriter of this wonderful thing. And then my dad's health condition turned really bad. And unfortunately, from diabetes, he lost one of his legs. And so my mama became his chauffeur. Well, if you get my daddy, you get my mommy. So all of a sudden, it's a 2-for-1 deal. So what a wonderful thing this was. And I was watching this all in action. All my life, I heard about how Tutu would come and they would talk story about cases and about what is this concept, what is that, and how does it actually play out? How do you do it? And all of this stuff. And then I was watching it actually play out live with my own parents. And it was a wonderful experience. I gotta tell you folks, I'm so lucky. And then right before the release, my father passed away. And my mother continued with the committee until the finalizing of the book. And so she wrote a coda that is located at the end of Nana Ike Kumu 3 on her dream. So if you can, please read that coda. And that is her journey, as well as mine, on this wonderful trip that we took, that we called life, and where we are today. So thank you for letting me share about my thing. I am actually at Loea Trust. My title is social worker, Ho'opono practitioner. And I was given this position was created when we started providing Ho'opono social service group for our children and our families to learn the process, and it's an adapted process of Ho'oponopono. So, as all Western things are, we have to write up our frameworks, get our curriculum together and all of that stuff. So it took a little while to get those things together, because how do you quantify how do you evaluate? And then we came to the conclusion, we're not going to evaluate the process. No, what we're going to evaluate is their learnings and how do they incorporate the learnings from their mind that they learn with us into behaviors. So that's what we're going to evaluate from this program. We have been offering Ho'opono for the last, since 2018. I have been privileged to be part of a training team that has trained over 48 individuals to do a Ho'opono program for themselves if they would like to. We also offer it at the Local Trust at every single kipuka or office that we have. So from Kauai all the way to Hawaii Island. And at this time, it is going on statewide. And because we started in a time of COVID, it was started as a Zoom program. So it's going to continue that way all the way till mid-August, about that time. But by next year, be on the lookout if wherever you're from, if you would like to join and learn Ho'opono and that's where our Queen's will and trust comes forth. You must attend with your children and your families it's for the betterment of the children, not just of the adults. So we offer it for our families. And if you'd like more information, visit our website, onipa'a.org, and call our Malama line, and you can get more information that way. So, Mom.
Let me continue.
Oh, okay.
Okay. At West Oahu, I teach Ike Kupuna because a lot of people who log on or who register for higher education understand the words Ike Kupuna, but they really, in their own families, the parents don't share information that they got from the families, their parents and grandparents. So Ike Kupuna just becomes words. And so I tell them, I'm going to share my own personal experiences and my family's, my mother's and my tutu's experiences. That is Ike Kupuna. And Ike Kupuna, if you're not one Hawaiian, you go to your own parents and your grandparents and you ask for those kinds of stories. That's how you pass on ethnic information. So all of my courses tie in Moʻolelo that I read about Hi'iaka i Kapoliopele. It ties in Aumakua that I read about the different forms like the mano. I talk about my personal experience in healing. And so what Kaʻaiʻai referred to as we live the concepts of Ho'oponopono. It was not just for up here. Tutu Pukui intended we make use of it in a living way, not just to keep it up here. So the way I teach the courses is I give the example of my personal experience and I tell them what I say, what I hear, and the help I get. Because Aya Ilokone Iko Kino means not just yourself, your ancestors come to help you. And when I was invited to do the research, like a Westerner, I said, yeah, I like do that. But that night I went home, I began to have doubts. The doubts came from the Hawaiian way. Because my father said to me, if you not do it right, the punishment might fall on your children. Oh, and the weight hit me in the heart. My children are precious. I had to go check myself out in a Hawaiian way. The Hawaiian way for me was my genealogy. If there was something in my genealogy that said it is kapu, I cannot do it, I would obey. I searched. I confirmed my lineages. I confirmed I had healers on my mother's line, still active. And then one day at the dinner table, an auntie came. She added her condemnation to me for even saying I'm going to do Ho'oponopono. I was very kaumaha, but I was very onipa'a, steadfast in my response. And I said, Auntie, I'm not doing this to hurt our people. I want to help them. My mother suddenly began to shift, came forward in the chair, opened her mouth, but the voice came out was not hers. The voice was somebody else. And that voice said to me, the silent stranger is leaving. Your way is clear. The next day, I took it into the office and I asked, I want to schedule one of the appointment slots with Tutu Pukui. I got to have the interpretation. Tutu questioned me as she asked, who did you think the voice belonged to? Notice the questions that she phrased to me. Who did you think it was? I said the first thought was my tutu man, because I have seen him in action, in doing things. And then I said, but it wasn't him. So she asked another question. Did he have an aumakua? And I said, yes. He used to go feed the aumakua, and my mama was very mi'ele of the children. She would ask her father, Papa, who are you taking the food into? Get alcohol over there. He said, Kuli Kuli. She said, when he came out, the plate was empty. She said to him, oh, I know you're going there to drink the liquor because you like hide from Mama. He gave her the stink eye and he said, shut your mouth. So Tutu asked, did your mother ever ask for the name of his aumakua? She said, I went ask him one time and he said, I'm not ready. Tutu made the statement that hit me in my heart. So your grandfather's aumakua was a stranger to your mother? I said, yes. So she said, that voice was your aumakua. To have that interpretation of the ʻŌlelo from the aumakua made me feel in my heart I had to be honest about my desire to help people in the Ho'oponopono way and never do it for selfish reasons. Getting the sanction also built up a level of confidence in me not to be distracted by negative challenges. And so when I began my journey in Ho'oponopono, I was very open and I was willing to listen. When I did services of Ho'oponopono with families in a certain community, I go meet community groups to let them know what I'm going to do. Ha'alulu inside because I don't know what I'm going to get. But let me tell you, community groups looked at my credentials. First thing they asked was, did you learn this only in the books? That is a valid question. Because I know if you only learned it academically, you're not ready. And so I said to them, I learned from Tutu Pukui, but as I learned from her, I realized we were doing some of those things in my own family, but we never called it Ho'oponopono. We just did it. And in many Hawaiian families, sometimes you do things like you say, I am sorry, please forgive me. The other person says, I forgive you. That is part of Ho'oponopono. But you don't label it Ho'oponopono. So when you live your culture and your beliefs and practices, you don't label. At least in my family, in that era, you don't label it. But when you only learn from the books, you learn the labels. And not necessarily the Hawaiian way, which is what you know, you gotta bring out in your opu, in your gut. It's gotta be no. And when the two can combine, you're ready to practice in the Hawaiian way. So Ho'oponopono requires that level of insight of yourself. My husband always said, know thyself. Otherwise, you're only doing an academic exercise. Yeah. And he says, the Hawaiian way, when you do it, not just you yourself, but the spiritual power you believe in. Earlier, I had talked about how the aumakua, which is my aumakua too, because if it was my tutu's aumakua, it became my mother's aumakua. She inherited it in her DNA, passed on down to me. I inherited in my DNA, and I firmly believe this. That's why for me, aya ilo kone keia. It is inside of me. And one time my hanai boy went in a coma. Our family was asked for help. And I said, yes. That night before we went to bed, I did Ho'oponopono for my family so we could remove all negative distractions, because we had to harness together, pull together the mana from each of us to make us strong. That night I pule for guidance. And later on in my deep sleep, I hear a voice that says, "Hi'iaka ikapolio pele." I didn't need it translated. I knew exactly what we had to do. Hi'iaka captured the spirit of Lohiao and massaged it in his feet. And Lohiao recovered from his deep, deep, deep sleep. I recognized that as a coma. And that's what we did. The treatment went for 5 days. On the 5th day, my Hawaiian son opened his eyes. The doctors had done tests over a period of 3 days. They couldn't find the cause. They were at a loss as to what to do. But Hawaiian spirituality in doing healing requires that genuine oia'i'o in the individuals that provide the help. I used my knowledge and skills, but the direction came from my aumakua. So when I talked about aia'ilokone, those of you interested in a health career, and especially that helps with healing, know thyself, deal with your issues, and make yourself pono before you try to help others in the Hawaiian way. So Kaʻaiʻai, I turn it to you. How are you going to follow that act?
I know, yeah, she just threw them out there. Well, first of all, what was Uncle Pinky's role as how was his involvement in the effort of, first of all, Nana Ike Kumu, and because you folks had a Western trained psychiatrist. Tell us a little bit more about why the Lilokalani Trust also thought that it was a good idea to bring on Hawaiian cultural specialists.
Early on, even before I got them, it came from the director himself, a part Hawaiian, Pinky Thompson. As a social worker, he wondered why Hawaiians were still high on the dysfunctional rates. He said, what are we missing? What are we not providing? And he realized that when the social worker said, they asked me about the Hawaiian curse. I don't know how to do that. And Pinky said, that's it. We need to know Hawaiian mental health practices. And they, through your father, it was his case. He was astute enough to pick it up. The door opened for Pinky to the director of social services to say to your father, let's move. Who would you go and get if you had the choice? And that was the connection that they needed. Verification. Now here's a Hawaiian social worker who doesn't know how to deal with curses, Hawaiian curses. This is a chance for us to get in a culture consultant. The timing was right. It opened at a point where he was hired into that agency. And then right after that, I finished my MSW degree and they offered me a job there as well. And with the two of us, with Aunty Malia Craver, we could raise those questions and we could demonstrate the questions we were asking would help us to better service the client. The Western institution likes to know how, if they're going to get a consultant, how the worker's going to use it. It required a strong connection in providing service to the child and the family, and the need to know more in depth about the dynamics of what was happening. And in this way, the culture consultant was also, at that time, Jack Harded. He also raised the question, something is missing. Pinky, we gotta figure it out. Jack remained on staff as the psychiatric culture consultant, meeting with Tutu Pukui, not to challenge her, but to learn from her the necessary components of the Hawaiian words so that we could better arm the social workers to know how to work with the clients. And so that approach is what we see in Nana Ike Kumu Volume 1. It is the encyclopedic approach. The name of the concept, the Hawaiian way and how it's done and its effects, and then the Western psychiatric consultation comments. And those comments, Jack Hardig believed in what he said. And I believed he did not transform it to fit himself, but it reflected what Tutu Pukui was wanting for families to learn. Nanaike Kumu Volume 2 talks about how some of these ideas fit in the life cycle of a person as they journey through life from baby, from emerging children to young adults, to those ready to have children and marry, on into kupunahood. It singles out such topics as, what is self-image? How does cultural trauma, what did that do to the self-image of the ethnic Hawaiian person? It destroyed. It was a heavy assault on the self-image. And I guess I can just finish out. And so Tutu made sure we knew our family gods enter in the piko at the top of the head. They exist in the piko with the living family, but in the na'au, when you're all disturbed and pono'ole, it merges in the na'au, the seat of intelligence and emotions and solutions. It is a seat of spiritual mana. It is that uhane that we have in ourselves. And that uhane in ourselves, when we're alive, goes on many adventures at night in dreams and they meet with deceased relatives. They mingle with that uhane. So the uhane of beloved kupuna who died connect with the person who is sleeping, especially if they are troubled. So when I talk about aya iloko ilokone, that is what cultural trauma affected in each of us. That belief in our uhane, whether they're alive or they're dead. So that is a topic I plan to talk about in IVAC next week, Thursday. So I know we have reached the time and we've got to bring closure. You didn't learn how to do Ho'oponopono. You cannot. Took Kaʻaiʻai 40 years before I acknowledge her.
43 years, gang. I'm just saying. So if I, who was raised with it and practice every day, no can even get the title, that speaks to her integrity of my mother and my father for keeping the rigidity and the truth, oiaʻiʻo, to our Hawaiian cultural values and our practices, and upholding that truth and following through with that. Just because I'm their child doesn't mean I get the free pass.
Yes.
I had to go like everybody else. So mahalo nui, everyone, for coming and joining us and learning about my mama and her journey with Nanaiki Kumu 1 and 2, but most especially volume 3.
Mahalo nui to you both, Anake and Kaʻaiʻai. We really appreciated you sharing your moʻolelo, both of your moʻolelo. We did share the link, so if people want to purchase Nana Ikikumu Volume 3 from the Mea Hawaii, it's in the chat, but they can also win a copy by filling out our evaluation form. So you can either win Nana Ikikumu Volume 3 or an American Sunrise or Living Words, Living Nations, Living Words. So our next Big Read Hawaii event actually starts in about an hour with our hoa at Windward Community College Library. It'll be featuring Emily States of Ka'ulumaika. And so if you would like to attend that, you can check out the Big Read Hawaii schedule, and we'll share the link in the chat for so you can register and get that Zoom link. Our next installment of Mo'olelo will happen next Thursday with Chris Caravallo of Mana Comics, and he'll be teaching us how we can create our very own superheroes. So you can still register on our website. We just want to mahalo everybody for coming today, and mahalo especially to Anake and Kaʻaiʻai for sharing their time and expertise with us. And with that, I will stop recording and say e mālama pono kākou.